Today, I have with me Maggie Green, and I'm really excited about Maggie because she's going to talk about something I've never talked about on my podcast before, and that is cookbook writing.
Correct.
Yes. And so welcome, Maggie.
Thank you. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we've been talking and chatting and getting to know each other because we've never met before. And her story is so interesting. And I know it's going to inspire a lot of people because she got started in, well, she has, she'll go into her background, but she's always loved cooking, but she didn't really get started doing what she's doing now until 2 years ago. And she's now 56. So, but she has also another great story about one of her mentors and how she got started late. So I'm excited for her to share that story. But she clearly has a love of cooking. And so I'd like to start, Maggie, by asking you, when did this passion start? Was it when you were a child?
Yeah, it started when I was young, and the cooking actually came probably after even my love of reading cookbooks. My mom was a cook that cooked for us. We had a big family, 10 people in our family. She cooked out of necessity, maybe more than out of joy, so to speak. But I was inspired by her commitment to doing this for us. And, it always involved nothing really complicated, but she always made an effort to be sure that we all had dinner on the table every night for all of us. We sat down together as a family. And when they went out on the weekend, there was something hot on the stove for us to eat. Anyway,
so you had the traditional, like you had supper at a certain time,
supper
in
at
front
home
of the
with
TV,
my family, right, every night. So my mom's cooking was the commitment part that I think as a mom, that's when I appreciated, is when I was raising my own family. But I was more inspired in the kitchen, like the cooking part, by my grandmother. And this sometimes happens to us as it kind of skips back a generation. And a lot of people I talk to who are our age maybe talk as much about their grandmother as they do about their mom.
Yeah.
So I'd go to my grandmother's, and I think I was always felt like there was special things she cooked for me. And if I talked to my sisters, they'd say the same thing. They'd say, oh, she made this for me, and then she'd make this for the other one. So it was always kind of interesting to think about that. But my grandmother liked recipes, and she liked to read recipes, and she saved recipes, and she rewrote recipes in her own handwriting on note cards, the little index cards, like we've often seen in vintage recipe boxes. Maybe you even have one of your own, some from your own.
Yes, my husband has his grandmother's coconut pie recipe
written in her handwriting. Right.
And she forgot to write the eggs. And so the first time we cooked or found it and cooked it, it was like something's missing. So we finally figured out it was eggs.
Something's wrong with this recipe. No
but it
eggs.
is like every holiday we make her pies, and it makes two of them. They're so good.
I bet they're delicious. And, so that connection to my grandmother, and then my mom's commitment to meals, when I was in probably senior in high school and I was in college, I lived at home and went to the University of Kentucky, and I was studying food and nutrition. I got into reading cookbooks. And it wasn't because of what I was studying in college, but because of gifts that my Aunt Eileen would give to me. The annual Southern Living, it's the recipes, all their recipes in one book for the whole year. So like at Christmas, for whenever that year was, she would give me the annual recipes for the year before. And Laurie, I swear I read those books cover to cover. I read everything in them. And my sisters in the meantime are like, one of them's reading Johnny Tremaine. The other ones are like, going out with their boyfriends. The younger ones are like playing in the neighborhood. And I literally was like reading cookbooks.
That's
and
crazy.
Then
talk about a passion.
It was so it really started early with me. Then my love of cookbooks turned into me kind of teaching myself how to cook, because it really wasn't something, like I said, that I learned from my mom more of the intangible parts of cooking, if that makes sense. Like I really understood more as a mom, like why she did this. And it could have been out of necessity, but she definitely was committed to it. I can't say she was always particularly joyful about it, like I said, but she did it. So taught myself how to cook and was a registered dietitian. And I decided.
Now I know there's specialties with cooking, which I never really understood, but then like baking is more like in the oven. Yes. And then, and then of course,
so
pastry
there's different cooking methods.
Hmm.
And when you think about cooking methods, you think most of the time about the vessel or the way that they're cooked. Like a cooking method would be the air fryer, something more popular now. Used, and that's a utensil, but that's a way of cooking with hot air, surrounding the food with hot, intense air, versus like grilling, where you're actually using heat from only below, if you understand, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
So then,
broiling,
so I'm
broiling
thinking,
is heat from above, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so funny because when I think of when we were first talking, I think of a cookbook. I think, oh, just a compilation of recipes. But like you
No.
can actually have a cookbook that's on a specific,
100%, 100%. I
yeah,
tell my
that you
students all
love.
the time, we'll, talk about what I'm doing now, but when I tell them all the time that there's so many stories in cookbooks, not just about the people, but about the ingredients, about cultures, about ways of life, about moments in time, about cooking methods. You could tell a story about crock pots.
Mm.
And when a crock pot's when's your first memory of a crock pot? Probably in like the 1970s, maybe the colors that it was, the design that it had.
Hmm.
It had a ceramic insert. Sometimes the answer is
I got married in 1981 to my first
right.
husband, and I had that crock pot forever.
Exactly.
And I just got a new crock pot. It's so funny because I got a new crock pot probably about 3 years ago, just because it was bigger
Yeah.
and we could take it to tailgates and stuff.
Right.
And I got an Instapot, which is a very similar, it's kind of like the new age, right?
Yeah.
Crock
Yeah.
pot. And I have used the Instapot once.
Right.
I love my crock pot.
Exactly.
And
So
I
that's
think
what
of
I
it as a
mean.
winter
I mean,
thing.
so even if you mention like a utensil or what if I said let's talk about stories of wooden spoons or like things that we like stir soup pots with. You might remember something from your family or a favorite spoon that you have, like favorite wooden spoon. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
so
there's
neat.
stories behind almost everything that we touch, taste, eat, feel, experience in the kitchen.
Well, I
And
think
that
particularly our age,
100%,
there's
right.
so many
So
stories.
much. And so much of it is connected to family and
Hmm.
not only what we have experienced as grandchildren and children, but if any of us have had children of our own, and now they're not really like around us anymore like they used to be, but they, we still interact with them. But the story of their growing up with us and the experiences that we had with them in the kitchen, and now the experiences that we get to have with them in food as they're opening, going to college, starting their own apartments, calling you for recipes, calling for advice. How did you make this? How did you make that? I think this is the age where it all kind of, at least for me, it's definitely collided because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
definitely in the sandwich generation. My mom is still alive. She's 85. My oldest son is 24. Our youngest is 19. And we're right in the middle of all of it.
Yeah, you made me think of my grandmother had this amazing, every Christmas she would make these pecan balls.
Yeah.
They were pecan
Yeah.
balls and they had flour on them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So
we
good.
loved them.
Yes.
But when you go and look for pecan balls, they don't taste like my grandmother's pecan balls. So I don't know what was in them.
There was
And
something that she did that made them hers.
yes, and so my niece somehow found the recipe. I don't know where she found it.
Yeah.
What a treasure that was, the day we
Right.
found my grandmother's pecan
I know, and it's
ball
so neat. It's
recipe.
like
Yeah.
finding her.
Yes. Yeah. And we don't write things down as much like that they used to. We
Yeah.
kind of have everything on our computer. So
Yeah.
putting it in a book is kind of like leaving that legacy. I love
Yeah,
that.
and cookbooks, the print cookbooks themselves are permanent. I know eventually over the course of time they're going to go away because we everything that's on this earth will eventually, go away. But what I mean by permanent is that compared to a food blog or compared to an online course, of which I've had both and have both. I don't really have the food blog anymore, but the book is permanent. And people can interact with the book, I think, better in a kitchen than they can with electronic devices. Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic and a lot of online classes are being taught, and actually online cooking classes, which is great. It's almost like you have an instructor in your kitchen, but I promise you that after that class is over, I still believe that print cookbooks have a place beside our ingredients, our cutting boards, our knives, our pans, because everything else in a kitchen outside of learning these classes is all tactile and all something that we touch and experience. And a cookbook to me fits in the kitchen.
Yeah, I still use, like, I have
Right.
recipes and I open a cookbook. I had found this really neat, it was like a clear and cookbook stand, and you could
Yeah.
put the cookbook in it and it would
Yeah, and
protect it from
stands up and
splatter
there it
and
is.
stuff.
And you can
Yeah.
make a note in there, like you mentioned your grandmother's note card. left
Mm,
out the eggs.
yeah.
You can write that in there, and believe it or not, there are errors still made in cookbooks that are printed today. It's just part of the publishing and
Yeah.
editorial process. It happens, but you can write in, you can, if you've noticed something that you want to tweak or whatever, you can write it in a book. And
That's
when you
right.
make it the next time, you
Yeah.
can refer to that note.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually got a 3-ring binder and I started hole punching stuff
Right.
that I would print out. It's funny how I think our age I still like printed books to
I
read.
do too. And
Yeah.
I still use my pen and notebooks like a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
for recording things for myself. So I think I encourage people who are even younger to still, write with a pen and a
Yeah, and
notebook.
I think too, something that I think of about a cookbook is some people think, "Oh my gosh, that's overwhelming and hard." But I mentioned compilation
Yeah.
cookbooks. One of my favorite cookbooks. Now, it isn't the most healthy one, but it was a recipe book that the boosters, the parent booster club in
Yes.
both my daughters played high school sports, and so it was a fundraiser,
Yeah.
and they collected recipes from all the parents.
Yeah.
And I get all my wings I use for my tailgate every year that everybody
Yeah.
loves is
Yeah.
from that cookbook that was, I mean, it's from like 2000
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
But
got
there's
stains
memories
in it.
connected to that.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
maybe have the names of the families who played
Yes.
sports with them.
Yes. Hmm.
You have memories of things you did together,
Hmm.
times that
Yeah.
you all got together. So I think cookbooks do have the potential to evoke a lot of really
Yeah.
fond memories as well.
Yes. I
I know
love
that
that.
not everybody's kitchen experiences revolved around, rainbows and daisies all the time. Because when you're raising a family and you're from a family, the kitchen table sometimes was the place where people could really be themselves, especially in the context of just immediate family. And sometimes people would argue at the dinner table. My dad and my sisters, talking politics. Imagine that, like back in the 70s and 80s, like, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, why are we? I was always like, this just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's where things happen, is around
Yeah.
the table, and it
Yeah.
was because of
My parents always talked about their day.
yeah,
Their
yeah,
day. They both worked in the school system, and they would share stories about what happened in their day. My mom was not the best cook. I don't have great memories of my mom, but she
right,
worked. I mean, I
right,
think back, my dad did nothing. I mean,
right. My dad didn't
he
do
was
anything.
great, but he
My
really
dad did
didn't
a
do much.
lot, but he
Didn't
did
know
not
how,
do a lot in the
yeah,
kitchen. Let me
didn't
put
know
it
how
that
to do
way.
the laundry. She
Right.
worked. She did the laundry.
Yeah.
She made the dinner, and so she
Right.
did whatever was easy.
I would love to talk about this topic for a minute because I think cooking and being able to cook and prepare food for ourselves and feed ourselves is it's a privilege that we have. And the fact that we maybe have the capacity to do it even and the desire, I think it's a gift. It really
Mm,
is. If
yeah.
it's and cooking's an amazing thing. To think that I could drive 5 minutes away to my local supermarket and pick up anything I want to cook for dinner tonight, literally,
Yeah.
and bring it home and prepare it.
Hmm.
I mean, this is like not possible for everyone in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a book and it was really powerful because it was a book about, not about this, but it was more about like eating more slowly and
Yeah.
chewing your food. Cause
Yeah.
I'm a fast eater. I'm like, "Arr, arr, 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 arr."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it says like, look at your food
Yeah.
before you eat it.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank the
whoever
food.
you believe in
Whoever, well,
for the
right,
food.
because if I go, let's just say I go pick up some salmon. I mean, I didn't fish for that salmon.
Yeah.
I didn't clean the salmon. I
Yeah.
didn't keep it chilled and prepare it for sale. Someone did that for me.
Yes. Yes. So be thankful.
And
Think about
everybody
those.
that's
Mhm.
cooking, that's listening to this, it's true for all of us, unless you grow, catch, hunt, whatever, all your own food, which maybe somebody do, but that's not really very realistic. I think cooking really does allow us to slow down and like think
Yeah.
about these things.
I love that.
And I always took cooking for my children when they were younger as like the greatest part of my day, because I did. I literally stopped whatever I was doing and I cooked dinner. And I didn't do it because I had to. I didn't do it. I didn't consider myself to be above it. I didn't consider myself to be too educated to do it. I didn't consider myself to wish it was something somebody else would do for me. I really used it as a time where I could slow down and connect with them. And a lot of times when they're teenagers, they needed me there, more than, when they were little. They're toddlers. They're just like, playing around on the floor. But
And
I
did you
really,
have the family dinners like
yeah,
you
yeah,
had? Yeah, I love
yeah.
that. All
And
right, so
that's
let's
what
get
my
into your
friend,
backstory. Let's
yeah,
get in.
so once I, was reading cookbooks and I went to school for food and nutrition, started my own company in 1994. I actually, it was in 1996. I started it in 94, but we incorporated in 96. And I was a personal chef cooking privately for people in their homes in the greater Cincinnati area. And through volunteering for a fundraiser for Chefs Collaborative, I got randomly paired with Ethan Becker, who was the co-author of The Joy of Cooking. He lived in
And
Cincinnati
how long
at the time.
back does that, I mean, we all probably have had a copy of
The
I think I
first
got mine
Joy
for a
of
wedding gift.
Cooking was published in 1931. So everybody thinks they have the original, but there's only very few people that really have the original.
Yeah.
So 1931 was the original Joy of Cooking. So I met Ethan. Ethan's the grandson of Irma Rombauer, who wrote the original edition of Joy in 1931. And he lived in Cincinnati, and we got paired together for this fundraiser. We had a very nice evening. It was a ticketed event with local growers paired with local chefs. And they sold tickets to raise money for Chefs Collaborative. So after I worked with Ethan, met his wife, Susan, came home that night and got a phone call the next day from someone in their office asking if I'd be interested in talking to Ethan and Susan about me working with Ethan to test and develop recipes in preparation for the next revision of Joy of Cooking, which would have been in 2006. And as someone who remembered the cookbooks were really my thing to begin with, I thought, this is crazy.
Did you tell him when you met that you
I didn't tell him then.
For fun?
This is what you want to know what I did when I met him the first night. I went into Ethan's kitchen in his home over in Anderson Township here in Cincinnati, and there were some dishes in the sink, and I'm one of 8 children, so my instincts kicked in, and I just thought, well, if we're going to do anything in the kitchen today, we've got to get these dishes cleaned up. I mean, Laurie, I didn't even put any thought into this. I just started washing the dishes, getting them out of the sink, getting everything ready, getting the kitchen ready to actually do some food preparation, cooking. And the next day, well, it wasn't that next day, but a couple of days later, Susan told me, she said, we could not believe that you walked in as a volunteer chef and you did the dishes. I said, well, that's part of cooking. We can't cook and not have dirty dishes. And we can't cook and have dirty dishes in the sink. It's just part of the whole thing. I actually say cooking's really 5 different things. It's not just one.
Yeah.
It's planning what you're going to eat, buying your ingredients,
having a prepared space,
get them in your house, preparing the meal, and then cleaning up. Someone has to do all of those things.
Yeah. And so then
after that,
I worked with them.
I worked with them, and I ended up being the editorial liaison for the Joy of Cooking Trust for the 2006 edition of the Joy of Cooking. So if anybody has a Joy of Cooking with the big red dot on the front, it's the Joy of Cooking is, the circle is red and it says Joy of Cooking in white. That's the way the dust jacket of that book looks. And on the cover, which is the casing, everybody takes the dust cover off. It's a gold circle with Joy of Cooking in it. If you read the acknowledgements, it talks about Maggie Green, that's me. So that was the 2006 edition. It was a wonderful experience between 2001 and fall of 2005. The responsibilities and things I did just ramped up. We were a team. They allowed me to have a lot of really great experiences working with them and communicating with their editor in New York. The publisher's name is Scribner. Their imprint is Simon & Schuster, and it was just a terrific experience to get to do something that I didn't go to school for this, but that just reminds me that we don't have to have certifications and exact training to do things well. Mm-hmm. We can lead projects and do things with the knowledge base that we have. And that's exactly what I did. I leveraged things that I knew and used it to the advantage of the team, and it worked out great.
So you talked about a mentor who inspired you when we were, before we press record. So you could speak to that a little bit.
What happened with Ethan was very inspiring because he was in a family of cookbook writers. And I love to just hear him talk about this. After Ethan, though, and as a result of working with Joy, I got asked to do a lot of different things in the community. And I always tell people, I think one of the best things we can do, and I know we're in a pandemic, but this will not be forever, is get connected in your local community. Meet people in your local community, and not to talk about who you are and what you do, but just so you have a network of people in your local community people call you to help with volunteer events, I always tried to say yes. And I got asked to do another one. I was actually judging a dessert competition as a ticketed event, but it was desserts. And so I had to taste, and, somebody won the prize for the best dessert. And while I was there, a woman walked up to me, and we started talking, and she asked me, have I ever thought about writing a cookbook of my own? So that was the pivotal moment for me in my transition from like helping other people do all the things to writing my own cookbooks. And I said to her, I don't think about it a lot. And she said, well, I just want you to know, if you ever have an idea, send it to me. So she gave me her business card. And what I think people need to realize is that publishing is a business, and publishers are in business to publish books. That's to edit the book, design the book, lay it out, get it printed, and help market and sell the book. They don't write their own books.
Yes.
Traditional publishers do not write the content for their own books. They're always looking for people to do that for them, or accepting proposals for ideas to accept an author on their list. So if we really take this seriously and realize that cooking and writing, the craft of those two things, is in demand for cookbook publishers.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love the
point.
point.
You want to get published, we can do it.
And it's funny because you said what you said to her was, I don't think about it a lot.
I don't think
which
about
means,
it a lot.
which means you thought about it.
Right.
You thought about it.
I
You
thought
did
about
have
it,
a
but
thought
I never
about it.
really I guess I was in a situation then that a lot of people might be in now, like, how would that even be possible for me?
Exactly. And you suppress it because it's like, oh,
well, yeah, you think, well, that's not possible. I'm just going to do all of these things for all these other people and help them get published.
Yep.
So what shifted for me then was the realization that publishers are waiting for us. And I just decided, okay, the only thing I can pitch to them is exactly who I am and what I do. And I, being a notebook person, had kept track for a couple of years for things that I cooked for my family. And so I turned it into a proposal called 1 Year in My Kentucky Kitchen, 12 months of fresh seasonal homemade food, because, I was committed to cooking at home. I'm college educated, but I still decided I'm going to do this because I love it. And I love doing this with my children, for our family.
So take me back to where you were mentally. So she put this little seed in your head.
Well, of course, mentally you think this isn't going to be good enough for a cookbook.
And so you called her, you kept her business card, and you.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I got it in 2008, and I probably sat on it for 6 to 9 months before I actually took any action. And I talked to some people, and I'm like, I really don't know what to write about. And I finally just, you do research, you're like Googling like how to write a proposal for a cookbook. What should I do? And I ultimately just decided the only thing I can offer to them is exactly who I am and what I do.
Authentic. How about that?
And imagine that. So, and a little side story, my father collected books by Kentucky authors. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky originally, still live in Northern Kentucky outside of Cincinnati. And so the University of Kentucky Press, in his opinion, published some of the best books about Kentucky, and they truly did. Classics, Kentucky authors that have a very deep tradition. And he wasn't alive at the time, but I thought to myself, Dad would be so shocked that the acquisitions editor from UK Press gave me their business card. Have you ever thought about writing a cookbook? And so you're looking at all these books and you're measuring your before. You often hear people say, I'm measuring who I am now to their after. Like, how could I ever do this? But I just dug deep and decided there's the only thing I can pitch is what I have. And I turned it into a proposal. It got accepted, and they did change the title. And this is a beef that a lot of people have with traditional publishing. They think they're going to lose control, and they think that everybody's going to change what they want to do. But the truth of the matter is they have a marketing department at a publisher.
Yes.
And they have people that know what sells.
Yeah.
And I didn't change the content of the book. They just changed the title to make it reach out and grab people when they walk down the aisle at the bookstore or on Amazon. Like, oh, that sounds like something that might be appealing to me. Now, doesn't that seem helpful to you rather than thinking we're losing control?
Yeah.
So that got changed to the Kentucky Fresh Cookbook. It was published in 2011. I went on to write another Kentucky cookbook after that. It was published in 2016. And in 2018, 2 more cookbooks that are not Kentucky-based cookbooks or not Kentucky-focused. They're pantry-focused cookbooks. And those were published in the fall of 2018.
Yeah,
It's a
and I
great
feel like you
foreshadowing
gotta
to the pandemic. When I think about pantries
yeah.
and cooking and people cooking at home, I never even imagined that we would need books like this in the beginning of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like having, walking the talk as
Oh,
now a
yeah.
teacher,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you gotta like
Right.
have those experiences and those different
Exactly.
experiences.
I think the
So
best way we can teach things is by, you know, I've heard it said, like, I'm a product of I really truly am a living, breathing embodiment of what I teach and believe.
yeah,
It 100%. So people that come to learn with me, they get that part of me.
yeah,
And they have to grow into the person though that believes that about themselves.
yeah.
That's the
So
transformation of becoming a cookbook writer, is A, believing that you really could even do it, and B, believing that a publisher would really even want what you have to offer, and
yeah,
C, having the courage to do it.
yeah.
It doesn't
So
cost anything to pitch. Zero.
yeah. So tell me
Nothing.
about Irma. I'm trying to get
Okay,
to the
so
story of
Irma,
Irma.
Ethan's grandmother, Irma
Okay.
Rombauer, was 55, and her husband committed suicide. If you want to read more about that story, there's a book called Stand Facing the Stove, written by Ann Mendelsohn. And it's this history and story behind the joy of cooking, focusing on Irma and her daughter, Marion Rombauer Becker.
Yeah, and just to
Um,
refresh everybody's memory, Ethan's grandmother was the author of the
Original,
original.
right. So when
Yeah.
she was 55, her husband committed suicide, and Irma found salvation in work, and she decided she needed something to do and a project to work on. She was from St. Louis, and she was not a particularly good cook, but she knew where to get good recipes. So she was a good baker, though, but she collected recipes from family and friends and went to secluded retreat up in northern Michigan and wrote the manuscript for The Joy of Cooking, as it was in 1931, and self-published 3,000 copies at 55 years of age. She took the last money that she had, invested it in this self-publishing project. So that's why people say they have the original. That's truly the original. And then it went on to get picked up by a traditional publisher and first published by a traditional publisher in 1936, and has gone on to be published 6 or 7 different editions since then. The last one being in 2019, done by Ethan's son, John, who is the great grandson of Irma, and his wife, Megan Scott. They live in Portland, and they did a terrific job with the most recent revision.
One of the things I love to talk about is the legacy, that we leave, and what legacy are you leaving? Ask that question. And I think
Yeah.
about her at age 55.
Yeah.
She probably had, the typical whatever legacy, I'm their grandmother, I love my grandchildren and I
Right.
give them these recipes. But yet here she steps into this like new place because of this tragedy.
Right.
And she leaves a legacy of
For everybody.
careers
For everybody.
Yes.
And the impact that book has made on people's lives. I mean, when I was working with Ethan, and you would hear stories all the time at signings, people, the military families would be based in the United States. They'd have to move to Germany or another place overseas. They wouldn't pack the book with the family supplies with moving company. They would take the joy with them physically on the plane, because they were so afraid when they got there that they would be disconnected from it if it didn't arrive for a couple of weeks. They wanted the book with them. That's how much it meant to their family. Because, this was a time too when there were cookbooks being published, but not a ton of cookbooks. And
yeah, and the joy
also,
of cooking, and hopefully I'm getting my cookbooks right, but isn't it the one that's kind of neat with the red checker?
so the red check cover is Better
like,
Homes and Gardens.
Oh, that's Better Homes and
And
Gardens.
it has a ring. The way you can tell, The Joy of Cooking never had the 3-ring binding.
Okay, got it.
I shouldn't say never. There might have been a gift edition perhaps over the years, but not that I know of.
Did it say Joy of Cooking?
Yep.
Was it? Oh, so it's kind of a knockoff, I guess.
The cover of Better Homes and Gardens didn't say Joy of Cooking.
Oh, okay.
No. Better Homes and Gardens was always Better Homes and Gardens. Betty Crocker was always Betty Crocker.
Okay,
Better
got
Homes
it.
and Gardens is a corporate cookbook,
Mm.
And Betty Crocker is a fictitious character. She was never really a person. The Joy of Cooking is based in a family, and it comes from a woman who was 55 when she self-published her first 3,000 copies.
I'm gonna go look at I have a
And it
huge
went,
shelf
I bet
of cookbooks and see
at the
what I
time I worked, it probably had sold 18 million copies. It's got to be 19 million, maybe a little bit more at this
okay.
point. Copies of
Cool.
that book that
That's
had
so
been sold.
cool.
So
How
that's a
long did
huge
Irma live?
impact.
Out of
She
curiosity.
lived until 62.
Okay.
And then Marion lived until the 80s, and Ethan's
Mhm.
still alive, and John is still alive.
Oh, wow. That's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been so, I think that job taught me a lot. And I think in retrospect, we learn a lot looking back. I think this is how everything was supposed to go. And the reason I know that that was how it's supposed to go is because it went that way. And I could never have applied for that job. It came through volunteering,
Well,
truly, in my
yeah.
own community.
Yeah. And one of the things I love, because, I'm really passionate about helping people find purpose. The fact is you had this little seed inside of you that
Yes,
you
the
didn't
cookbook
even yet
seed, right?
realize. Yeah.
Right,
Um,
right.
but you took action. People think they can sit around and, oh, this, like, I'm going to get this like aha, like moment,
Right, right.
it's going to drop from the sky, but you are taking action that was in service to people.
Aha
Yeah.
moments, and I get ideas all the time for things.
Mm-hmm.
I always am filled with ideas, but we have to really listen to the ideas, but we do need to take action because we won't be helped by the universe or God or whoever you call it unless we get ourselves out there and do something.
Yeah.
He can't help us if we're sitting on our couch eating cookies.
Yeah. And our action, actually, to me, leads. I mean, it's like the
Yes.
universe is getting signals. Oh, she's taking
Yes.
this action, so let me drop this in front of her.
Yes. So when I
And
was
then,
a personal chef and decided to volunteer for this chef's collaborative event, I had no way of knowing I was going to get paired with Ethan.
yeah,
And he had no way of knowing he was going to get paired with me.
yeah,
But both of us just stepped out to help the organization because it was something we believed in, and we met each other. And then, you know, every person we meet just has this, you never really know what's
yeah,
going to happen.
yeah.
You don't know.
So I
Right?
was telling you before we started recording that I have a student who she wants to write a cookbook.
Yes.
And she doesn't know where to begin. And so she feels a little overwhelmed by it, as I'm sure a lot of people do, because you have this great
Yes.
idea, but like you were like, and then this person handed you a card.
Yes.
And so her idea is building a cookbook because she grew up on a farm. And it's not the healthiest recipes, but everybody loves comfort food.
Well, sure. And let's back up for a minute and talk about something, because I did, in fact, have an acquisitions editor hand me a business card and ask me if I had an idea for a book. But I like for people to think about what happened, what was required of me even before that happened. Because some people would say, well, Maggie, I can't do that because I don't have acquisitions editors from publishing houses handing me business cards. But I want to tell you, I stand for those acquisitions editor. I'm here to say, pretend I just handed you a virtual business card. They are waiting for people to write their books.
Yes. Actually, somebody just
publish their books.
Yeah. Somebody just reached out to my daughter who has a course online, and she talks about crystals, and she does remote crystal healing and all that kind of stuff, because that is something their readers are interested in. 100%. And they see a need for that, and they're trying to find somebody to write a book. And
the only thing I would advise people, if someone reaches out to you to write a book and they're expecting you to pay for it, I think you need to be sure that you're doing the right thing, because there are publishers out there that will hand you their business card and send me an idea for a book, and you don't pay anything.
Yeah, I think in this case they'll pay her,
right?
But then they'll also get a lot of the.
Right. And I would say you want to be paid in advance, and you want to get royalties, because royalties means that once you sell a certain amount of books, you get a certain number of dollars for every book that they sell. But royalties make the publisher stay invested in the book, at least until you earn out your advance. There are publishers that pay. It's more like a work for hire. Like if someone says, Maggie, will you write a cookbook about crock pots? And I say yes. And they'll say, we'll pay you $5,000. And I say, fine. But they say, we're not going to pay you any royalties. That means that they have no investment in continuing to sell the book. Once they earn enough to make paying me $5,000 worth it to them, they can stop. And I don't get, and what if the book goes on to sell millions and millions of copies and I still only get $5,000?
So the royalties mean you get money, but they still get money
They get money
from
right,
it.
right,
I
right,
see.
right,
I see.
right.
That's
So
so
that's what the
interesting.
royalties mean, but you
Yeah.
don't get
Got
royalties
it.
until after the advance of the book is earned. But
Yeah.
this is the kind of stuff I love to talk to people about
Yeah.
because publishing is a business and you're entering into a business relationship. But I personally, with the company that I had and the work that I was doing with Joy and other food and nutrition writing that I was doing, I didn't want to publish my own books. I wanted a professional publisher to do it for me.
Mhm.
And one that in Kentucky, one of the best Kentucky publishers there is, that's not, you know, I was an honor to be published by them.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I loved having a marketing team. I loved having an editor I worked with. I loved having a production editor. I loved having the Kentucky illustrator. I loved the whole thing. I never felt like I was giving up control one time because it was like they were doing this with me. Now, what people don't, okay, let's talk about profit then, how cookbook writers get paid. People are like, well, is it worth it if you, I said, well, yes, it was worth it. It was totally worth it for me, but everybody has to decide that individually. One person off of one book will not be able to raise a family and make a living. The books became assets in my business, if that makes any sense. It was like an income stream inside my business.
Mhm.
I have 4 books. They're all still in print and those still continue to sell. And, you know, you get revenue off of those. I
Mhm.
can go sell them at a farmer's market. Cookbooks, print cookbooks are portable.
Yeah.
Food blogs are not portable. And
Yeah.
I'm not bashing food blogs. I'm just trying to draw some comparisons here. But
Yeah,
you can
and
take them,
I think people, you have a podcast. I want to plug
yeah,
that as well, Cookbook Love.
Cookbook
But
Love, right?
I think we've evolved into, like, to me, reading takes time.
Yes.
And I love to sit and read a book, but I'm not going to get online and read a blog. I'm just not that kind of person. I've
Yeah,
never been
yeah,
that person. I know some people like blogs. I'd rather listen to a podcast
yeah,
because it's an
yeah,
on the go. I can consume in the car as I'm
yeah,
driving, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
can consume as I'm cooking.
Right. And I
Podcasts.
think we have to look at reading kind of like reading a physical book, kind of like we look at cooking a physical meal. Is it slowing down?
Mhm.
And I've had a shift in the way I think about time after my youngest son went to college. And that is that it's still the same amount of time. And
Mhm.
I totally get to decide if I want to feel rushed during the time of my life or not. And I'm tired of feeling rushed.
Yeah. Yeah. Make the
And if I
time.
want to slow down and read a book or cook a meal, that's what I love to do. And I feel so much better.
Mhm.
I do. So
Yeah.
I think that we need to look at time like what it is. It's our life. It's the days of our life. That's what time is, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the older that I get, the more I want to learn. I remember when I was a kid and I was in college, it was just like, you know, I hate this. And I avoided learning as much as
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
And now I like seek to learn. And
Yes, I
so,
think that's
yes.
true. And I think
Yeah.
we need to, if you want to write a cookbook or do some kind of a writing or publishing endeavor, we do have to shift into creation mode and not consumption mode.
Yeah.
And consumption mode from 2 perspectives, a lot of research and no action. You've talked about that. And then the other consumption mode that doesn't serve us as future writers and authors is comparing ourselves to other people through consumption and doing
Mm,
that old thing like we talked about a little bit ago, where we're comparing our now to their after.
yes.
It's not fair to yourself to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody started somewhere.
Yeah.
Everybody started somewhere.
Yeah. So back to, you can't make money off of one book. What's interesting is, I didn't tell you this, I'm writing a book.
Are you? Nice.
Yes.
It's exciting.
It's not a cookbook, but
That's
and if it
okay.
was, I would hire you. But yeah. So I've been wanting to write a book for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to write a book about my love story. And because
Yes.
every time anybody hears my love story, then they say, you need to write a book.
Yeah.
And so I've had on my vision board that I want to write a book.
Yeah.
But it's a big overwhelming thing.
Yes.
And I met somebody and she's talking about, if you have a business, you should write a book. So it gives you more authority.
Yeah.
And it also gets people to know you better. So
And
there's
she's
a
not
lot
talking about just an ebook. Is she talking about a print book?
a print book. Yes.
Yes, correct.
Print book.
Right. And I
Yes.
think that's important to make that distinction because
Mhm.
your publisher will produce the ebook as a companion product
Yes.
most of the time.
Yes.
But the print book is what you're talking about because you
Yes.
can take that to a speaking event.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can sell it
and-
from a stage.
And what the idea she gave me, and isn't it interesting? It's on my vision board, and here she came into my
Yes.
life, and it's like,
Yes.
and so I started to think about it, and I thought, Well, first of all, I've had her, I would have her as a guide, like a book coach.
Yes.
So that would help me be accountable. And she positions it as it doesn't have to be a big book. It can be a small book. And so and so that was like, okay, I can digest that.
Right.
And so in a way, it's weaving my story into my business. So
Yeah.
it's really not the book that I was thinking of writing. Maybe that
Right.
will come later,
Right.
but it's a book that I'm really excited about, that
Yeah.
I know, I think, well, it will match up with who I am in the world right
That's
now,
right.
and
That's right.
how I can inspire people with it. And so,
And when you
yeah, so
teach your students and they read your book, they're going to see the same thing, which is
yeah,
neat. Right.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm able to weave my love story into it in a way that's like more action oriented and
Yeah.
helpful, instead of just
Yeah.
telling like a
Telling your
memoir or
story.
something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It
So
really
yeah,
can
so
be
it's so
something
cool.
that's inspirational for people and connects them with who you are and what you do. And I think that that is, it's a great thing. And, really any kind of a, you and I, in the kind of business that we have, we're really are people talk about branding and being a brand, but it's not like I have a brand mark or a logo that's the business. The business is me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it comes from who I am and what I do. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it's probably similar for you as well.
Yeah, and I think to have a successful business, it has to be centered in passion, and you're
Yeah.
clearly passionate about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So no, like it is cooking, but more than that, it's the print cookbook.
yeah.
100%.
So I see
Yeah.
you kind of, I just had this idea. You're kind of like the labor and delivery nurse of little books, of
Yeah. So people
cookbooks,
talk
labor
about that,
you
right?
deliver.
So
Yeah.
the labor and delivery
How
books for
proud.
people
I
who want to
mean,
get
yeah.
published. And I
Is-
want people to get paid to get published. That's my
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah, I
I
love
want
that.
people to see the way that this works in the cookbook writing space because everybody has to eat. Not everybody has to cook, but some people will write nutrition focused books too because they're trying to help people eat better or heal or maybe gain their health back. Chronic
Yeah.
diseases. I have dietitians that work with me that, or some of them have passions for culture, not cultural, well, cultural, but also like regional American cooking. Cities in the United States that have different traditions, people interested in that.
Oh, you
Um,
just gave me an idea. So I just had a couple on who moved from Australia to Italy, and
yeah,
I love Italy. And I
yeah,
thought, oh my gosh, you could like write off a trip to your
yeah,
favorite
right,
country and
right,
write a book
right,
about the food there. Like
right,
spend like
right.
it's what's that? Eat, love, pray. Did you
Yes,
do the eat
eat,
part?
pray, love. Elizabeth
Yeah.
Gilbert
Yes.
ate in
Yes.
Italy, loved
Yes.
in,
I love
no,
that.
she ate somewhere else. I don't know where she loved. And then she
Yeah.
prayed, I think, in India,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. She did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then she found love in some island. I don't know where it
Correct,
was. Yeah.
somewhere. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I always think that's an interesting book because I challenge us all though. I think we can eat, pray, love like everywhere that we are. Right
Yes.
where we are,
Yes.
even
You don't
during a
have to
pandemic,
go.
we could have like done that
Yeah.
very same thing. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of, I think, giving ourselves permission to enjoy these things.
Yeah.
Food and cooking, if you like it, just lean into it.
Yeah.
If you like to pray and you like spiritual things, that's good. That's great. Lean into that too. And then, loving ourselves and other people. I mean, it's possible for us all right now, wherever
Yeah.
we
The
are.
pray part, I would go back to what we talked about thinking about who made your food and where it came
Yeah,
from and appreciating
100%.
that
It
what we
really
have.
is slowing
Yeah.
down. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So let's wrap up. And like,
Okay.
I would love for you to give some last words of advice to somebody. So say if somebody's listening to this and they're feeling like, it's too late in life to
Yeah.
start something new.
Right.
We also talked about Julia Childs before we
We
press
did talk
record. We didn't
about we
talk about
talked
her
about her
story.
before we recorded, but she
Yeah.
loved to eat and she was not trained in cooking, but she
Yes.
so because of her love of eating, when she went to France, she was just like overwhelmed with all the delicious food. And she said, I've got to figure out how I can teach Americans to cook this way.
And her husband loved it. So she learned from
Yes.
her husband.
Yeah.
And she was a government analyst.
And
So
she
she
was
had no
a
like, yeah.
6'2",
Yes.
55-year-old brunette with curly hair. And
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
loved Julia because why did people love Julia?
Yeah.
Because
She's
she
just
was
she
herself.
was so enthusiastic.
She was.
All
And
this
she was
energy.
herself.
Yes.
Right. Right. That's
Yes.
exactly right. So I think that this is a perfect topic for people who are listening to really think about it. And if you have experiences in the kitchen or cooking, nutrition, baking, whatever it is, never sell yourself short and think that somebody won't care, because you can have an impact on people through a print cookbook. Like there's no doubt about it in my mind. I've done it myself and I've seen my students do it. And I get my students' cookbooks, they'll send them to me, and I'm always just like in awe of the work that they put into it. And it is, it's work,
Mhm.
if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But I like to think it's just new. It's like a new way of like thinking about what we're going to do this week if we're writing a book.
Yeah.
And,
And I like to always talk. And when I say, improve your, best half should be your second half. And I like to talk about it as an adventure, and what an
yeah,
adventure this would
it
be
is
to
an
like,
adventure.
yeah,
It is an adventure. And I don't want to be the same person I was when I was raising my children because they're not here anymore.
yeah,
I'm still
yeah.
connected to them, but I want to be the person now that I'm supposed to be, growing and learning and doing new things and meeting new people. And because that makes my life, it just expands my life.
Yeah,
And
and don't you want your kids to be like, "Oh,
well,
look at mom
sure.
go. Look at mom
Yeah,
go."
right,
They want to
right,
be proud of
right.
you just like you want
Yeah,
to be
they
proud of
loved,
your kids. Yeah.
they never argued when we would have photo shoots here for cookbooks and they got to,
Yeah.
taste the food as it was being cooked. So there's a lot of great stories I'm sure that come out of that as well. Yeah, but I think that it's totally possible if it's something that somebody wants to do.
Yeah. So you have a program, and I did
I
want to
do.
just mention it. I don't normally mention programs, but I just put them in the show notes, but I want you to share what it is because I think it's amazing what you do. And there's a need for somebody to help people
Yeah.
like you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the name of the program?
So the name of the program is called Get Paid to Get Published.
Okay.
It is exclusively for people who want to write cookbooks and get paid to write their cookbook.
Yes.
It could be dietitians, it could be avid home cooks, it could be caterers, personal chefs, restaurateurs, bakers, but people that want to get their story of food, cooking, ingredients, nutrition, whatever it is, out in the world to have an impact on people.
I'm so excited. I hope people look you up.
So and you
what's
can
your
visit,
website?
It's www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. There's a fun free training, no cost. Just leave your email address. It's like Netflix on demand. You can watch the training, learn a little bit more about who I am, why I do what I do. And then I have a method that I created that I'll walk you through to talk about the steps you have to take to get paid to get your cookbook.
That's amazing, Maggie.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I'm so
You're welcome.
glad
I know,
I
it's
did a
been fun
call
to talk
out
to
for
you.
interesting guests. And when I saw yours, I was like, oh, yeah,
Yes,
she
it
did
is fun.
great.
So I want to thank you so
Yeah.
much for the opportunity to talk to you and to
Yes.
all the people listening.
Yes. Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.